Welcome back, y'all. So, El Conde is a film from 2023 made in Chile. It is a black comedy horror kind of film. It is directed by Pablo Larraín, who is mostly known for a bunch of other movies that are centered around some historical figure, just like this movie is. More on that in a little bit. And it stars Jaime Fidel, who is one of the biggest telenovela stars in Chile. It is a satire movie, and it portrays the dictator Augusto Pinochet, who was the dictator of Chile for decades. It portrays him as a 250-year-old vampire who, at this point, just really wants to die. The film starts off portraying the titular character as a royalist French soldier by the name of Claude Pinochet in the 1780s during the French Revolution, and he is discovered to be a vampire and survives an attempt to kill him. He goes through the French Revolution and sees the execution of Marie Antoinette, and he ends up faking his death so that he can flee abroad, and he ends up all the way somewhere in the Americas. He fights against revolutions in Haiti, then Russia, and in Algeria, and eventually ends up in Chile, 1935, where he joins the Chilean army under the name Augusto Pinochet. He rises up in the ranks and becomes a general, overthrows the socialist government of Salvador Allende in 1973, and he becomes the country's dictator. And he demands to be addressed as the Count, El Conde, by his family. At some point, the authorities of the country begin to investigate his wealth that he has, of course, gotten through ill means, and there's a bunch of human rights abuses that they kind of look into after he has left office, so he doesn't have direct control over them anymore. And he ends up faking his death again and settles on a farm somewhere in the middle of nowhere. And he just kind of keeps on living there with his wife and his butler, who is also turned into a vampire. And the butler dresses up as him and then goes out and just commits a killing spree as a vampire. And his family, the Count El Conde's family, thinks that it is the fault of the Count, of course, and they want to investigate that. They want to get rid of him because they're okay, he is killing people, he is going to be discovered, he's going to become more of a problem, and at this point, we want the wealth that he has. So why don't we try and get rid of him? They try to get a nun to exorcise him and kill him. The nun comes over and tells everybody, oh yeah, she's auditing the family's wealth. And in the moment where she's kind of going in for the kill, El Conde ends up just kind of seducing her. Not necessarily in a vampire way, but in a normal human way, and they just end up having sex. And that turns the nun into a vampire as well. That ends up prompting the arrival of Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister of the UK for 10 years in the 80s, the most neoliberal old hag free toilet grave you've ever seen. And she's revealed to be the mother of Claude, of Augusto, of El Conde. And that it's shown that she abandoned him at an orphanage when he was born. She apparently got turned by a strigoi, a kind of vampire. She's just pissed off by all of this, and she tells her son to kill the nun that he turned, and El Conde just kind of shows off his wealth instead to her. And then the nun says that she has just been faking her attraction to him the entire time. She wanted to become a vampire because that's part of her mission that the Catholic Church gave her. What? The Catholic Church wanted her to become a vampire? It's the mission is to like investigate the ill-gotten wealth, but the vampire part also being part of the mission, that is kind of wild. The nun ends up fleeing, gets captured and guillotined by the butler, and then the butler and the wife and the children all together try to kill El Conde and Margaret Thatcher to, gain the inheritance. But El Conde kills his wife and beheads his butler, and then the children are just kind of like left to salvage what they can of the farm. They leave, and a group of nuns ends up arriving, looking out over everything, and that is just where that kind of like leaves off. El Conde and Margaret Thatcher come back feeding on vampire hearts, and they start a new life somewhere else. And El Conde says that he wants to remain in Chile because he's like, oh, more leftists will emerge. So, he still wants to fight against the revolutions. He still wants to oppress people. He still wants to garner more ill-gotten wealth and still wants to kill people and drink their blood, as is his vampiric wont. I thought it was pretty funny in like a very dry kind of way. So I guess in that regard it's also appropriate that the British Margaret Thatcher ends up showing up. It's pretty well reviewed overall. I didn't think as highly of it. It's very well crafted. It's cool that it's in black and white. It's a very well crafted satire. That's about all that I can say for that. It's not super horrific, but that might make it easier to get into for some people. So overall, I thought this was a very interesting step into Chilean cinema. And I'm kind of interested to see what other work the director and stars of this film have done to see more of Chilean cinema. But whether this is a highlight of films that I've seen, I am not so sure. I think in contrast with Tinantina from yesterday, I can't quite say that I think as highly of this one as people thought as lowly of that one. So it goes all the more to show that you need to watch things yourself to form your own opinion of things. And you need to read political theory a little bit to form your own opinions on politics, like I have, because I definitely couldn't stand the character here if I've ever met him in real life. But that's the fate of dictators. That's how that goes. I didn't go into this expecting a very morally upstanding protagonist. Sometimes the horror is from a villain in the movie or a hidden monster, and sometimes the monster is the protagonist themselves. And in this case, that's very much the case. And it's a very interesting movie for that. El Conde from Chile from 2023.